This Black Friday, be smart. Grab Roborock's big deals on intelligent vacuums. Till December 2nd, get 67% off Roborock's Q5 Pro, featuring high-quality cleaning performance. 50% off Q5 Max Plus for entry-level users. And 43% off Q Revo S for ultimate convenience. Plus $700 off Roborock's S8 Max V Ultra with revolutionary corner-to-edge cleaning. Order now at Roborock.com or Amazon.com.
In the tapestry of life, we often find ourselves facing the profound impact of loss and grief. Today, we're exploring the poignant journey of Cleo Childs, who at the young age of 21 witnessed her mother's descent in early onset Alzheimer's. Through the years, she navigated the complex landscape of anticipatory grief, where time both flew and dragged as her mother slowly slipped away. In the depths of her sorrow, she discovered the power of poetry and spoken word, transforming her pain into a symphony of healing and remembrance. Join us as Cleo shares her story, reminding us of the enduring legacy of kindness and the profound connection between grief, healing, and the written word. Welcome to Fading Memories, the podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. Is your loved one living alone? Are you worried about their safety and well-being? I know the feeling. It can be tough to be there for them all the time. That's why I'm excited to share with you Caregiver Smart Solutions. Caregiver Smart Solutions offers a discreet home monitoring system that provides peace of mind to you without invading their privacy. How it works is simple. Small, non-intrusive sensors are placed around their home, and these sensors track their activities so you can see if they're eating, sleeping, and moving around normally. If there are any changes that might signal a problem, you receive text alerts. It's a great way to support their independence while giving yourself peace of mind. To learn more about Caregiver Smart Solutions, use the link in the show notes, and when you do that, you're also helping to support our show. If you like our show, be sure to follow it so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share it with a friend. That is the fastest way you can help an independent podcast like mine grow. She was just 21 when her mother started slipping away, far too young to navigate the cruel maze of Alzheimer's. By 28, she was left holding the pieces of her grief, searching for a way to make sense of it all. And that's when she picked up her pencil. In the midst of unimaginable loss, she found her voice through poetry. Today, we explore how the written word can help us process, heal, and honor the ones that we've loved and lost. Welcome back to the Fading Memories podcast. I am your host, Jen Fink. With me today is Cleo Childs. She lost her mother to Alzheimer's when she was 28, and in the midst of her grief journey, she discovered that writing poetry was an excellent way to honor her mom and also process her grief. So thanks for joining me, Cleo.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Cleo and I have had multiple reschedules, me for losing my voice and her because life is busy. So I'm so glad we're finally getting to do this. Why don't you tell the listeners about your background, because I just gave them that little tiny tidbit, and I'm sure you can tell it a lot better than I can.
Oh, I don't know about that, but we'll give it a shot. So I am Cleo Childs, and I got into poetry after my mom passed when she was 28, or I was 28, she was 66. And she got diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was 21. And I was a junior in college. And I became kind of her caregiver for a little bit of time there during my senior year. I went back and forth every day from school to my college. And I went to a small college at the University of North Georgia, which is about an hour away from Atlanta. And then I went back and forth about every day and spent every weekend I could with her for my senior year. And then I did something that I promised myself I would never do, which is I fell in love with a boy in another state. And I said, I will never be the person that's going to go and follow a boy. And yet I did. And that's a good thing because he's my husband. And so we've been together for 9 years. And then, but one of the best things my mom ever did is she let me go, and she let me go with love. And she said I needed to go and be with, this boy who I ended up having my husband with. And so I didn't get to kind of see the end of her decline. And then she passed away suddenly when I was 28 years old. And I went into deep isolation. And then in my isolation, I really began to write. I think that it was the only thing that writing was the only thing that made it feel a little bit better. I think grief is a very unique experience. I really didn't know about grief. I had anticipatory grief with my mom, but I never knew about full grief after losing her. And I went into deep isolation and I just started to write. And the only way that it came out that made sense was poetry. And then I wrote for about 6 months in isolation. And then I put my pen down, kind of re entered the world. And then back in December of last year, so 2023, I got inspired by songwriting and I started to write again. And then I went to a mentorship session with a renowned producer in Nashville. And I, read him some of my stuff, and not expecting anything of it. And he said it was amazing and that he would produce me. And I was like, okay, that was not on my, 2024 bingo card. And then I went and I produced an album and I released it with the hope that maybe it can do some good with saying exactly or being very honest about what my grief journey was and saying that I ended in peace and acceptance. I think one of the things when I was going through grief is I never knew how someone could go from the very depths of grief and being angry and being not even frustrated and despair and all these things into peace and acceptance. And I couldn't look to anyone to see how they did it from an emotional standpoint. So I put the album together in a way that maybe emotionally you may understand how I could get to peace and acceptance from that deep place of just disillusionment with God and anger in a very natural, organic way, because I do have peace and acceptance now about my mom's passing. And that's why I released the album. And that's what I hope it maybe has the potential to do. But I don't know if it will, but I released it with the hope. And I think that that's kind of me in a nutshell, as best that I can say. Which, at this point, I would give it a 95% confidence interval that everything that I said was correct up to that point, but we'll see. Feel free to ask me questions about my
Certainly.
journey.
Well, I'm sure that you did not have very many people that you could turn to that were close to your age that had had a similar experience. Like for myself, I was 31 when my first grandparent died. Neither one of my parents made it to 78, but my dad died when I was 50 and my mom died when I was 54. I think. Yes. She died in 2020. It gets complicated. I can't do math, so regardless.
After
I was
COVID, all time just seems wonky. COVID just messed up my entire sense of time, quite honestly. I'm like,
Yeah.
it could have been like a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, or like 5 years. And I'm like, it was in the past.
Yeah,
So,
there's like before COVID and after. There's not that in between time is like, especially for me, because we had sold and downsized and sold our really big house in town, and we rented for 2 years, the 2 years of COVID essentially, trying to figure out what we wanted to do. I'm not really sure we did figure it out. My husband seems to have figured it out. He's happy as a lark. We moved to a different area, which I love, but culturally it's a little bit different. And moving at an older adult age, it's really hard to meet new people. I meet them, but it's hard to get in there with them. So, it's like I wish I had taken the advice not to make major changes after somebody dies. Usually that's a spouse, but I think that applies to a parent as well because it's a pretty big upheaval. I mean, I didn't get a lot of time to deal with grieving my dad because I had to deal with my mom. And then my
Right.
mom dies and it's COVID. And the whole world is completely tuned out to your own particular needs because my mom died literally 2 weeks after the shutdown. So everybody was like, what the heck? Oh my God. It was a completely different experience than when my dad died. So I'm sure you had something similar because I'm sure most of your peers were like, had absolutely no idea how to interact with you as somebody who'd lost their parent. Was that true?
I think there were a few things. One is that I didn't know anyone who had lost a parent at that point. Two, I was probably the youngest person I knew to have someone with Alzheimer's rather than going it that way. Three, I really didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what to do with it. And so I felt not ashamed necessarily, but it was like a secret that I didn't tell anyone. So I also kind of isolated myself with it. And I only told very, very close people. And also, the people that I really told were my professors. So my mom got diagnosed with, we found the protein that she was going to have Alzheimer's. That's what it was going to turn into during my midterms week. So I had to go and call all of my family and let them know that mom got the diagnosis during my midterms week. And I went to my professors and I said, this is going on. My mom just got the protein that says she's going to have Alzheimer's. Can I push my test back? And all of them said yes. One of them, and I understand why she did it, she did say, are you sure that's what's happening? So because it's so odd. It's an anomaly for this to happen to someone. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, and then I went to all the Emory care clinics and my professors really worked around me. But when it comes to the other students that I was with, my friends at college, I kept it very close to the chest. It was a secret that this was going on. And in fact, it wasn't until maybe a couple of years when I realized I didn't have to keep it a secret, but I just didn't know anyone about it. So I didn't have someone go. And I think too, at my age, everyone's going off and, when I was in my early 20s, everyone's going off and talking about, oh, I went to this party and here, I had like 3 shots of tequila and I'm like, I spent Saturday with my mom and we watched Perry Mason, which is a very different experience from what all the other kids were doing that I knew about. But it was very isolating, but I think also, frankly, I isolated myself within it because I didn't tell anyone really that this was going on because it was so abnormal. I thought, who is going to understand? And I wanted to pretend to fit in. And by pretending to fit in, that was by pretending that my mom was healthy, like everyone else's moms.
I would assume that most people didn't have I'm not sure this is the right word, like the vocabulary around dealing with this disease at such a young age because, my mom started showing signs of memory loss. It's much easier when you look backwards when she was in her like mid 50s, earliest to mid 50s. So, and my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia, so it wasn't like we were unaware of the symptoms and what was going on. Just getting my mom on board with that was a challenge. But it's a little difficult. Like we had a photography studio and a 1-hour photo lab, and we did a lot of photo restorations and retouching of portraits. And it was a little hard to explain to a client who's like super frustrated because mom keeps screwing up what they want. Well, we think she's got dementia. It just doesn't feel normal or natural. So I can only imagine you're in college. Like, I bet you a lot of your peers didn't even really have much clue what Alzheimer's was, much less it could affect somebody so young.
Mm-hmm. If I heard about it, it was, oh, my grandparents have it, or, and I was like, oh, well, my mom, she started showing signs at like 60. My mom had us a little bit later, but not too much later. She had me at 38. So my mom was a little bit of an older mom, but still she was relatively young. I would say she was early onset Alzheimer's. And so my peers, even if I told them, I don't think they would have known what to have done. And I think that what I made the decision is it's best that I know and the people that have to know, and the people that are close to me know, but I wanted to pretend that there was normalcy in my life but as also when you're early 20s, you pretend to everyone that you're not who you actually are. You're putting on, like, at least, I was like putting on this big facade, like, oh, this is who, the person I presented to the world is not the person that I actually was. And one of the things I presented to the world is my mom doesn't have Alzheimer's, and the person I was is that, my mom is going to start having Alzheimer's, and I have these things that I have to deal with that no one else has to deal with. Like, my mom started drinking, and I had to go through about, you can't have, and she would forget that she had wine, and then she would try to hide it in like coffee mugs, and we're like, that's not, but she thought she was being clever, and then we had to take away the coffee mugs of wine because she had to deal with her, it would mess with her medication, and then she would get angry, and it's like, that's not something that any 20-year-old would be able to understand, and it's not something that I really felt the need to try to explain myself to, because there was no even way for them to understand what was happening.
Yeah, in our 20s, we're like presenting ourselves differently, like we're trying on different personas. And you
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't want to have the persona of Alzheimer's caregiver in your 20s. Not that we ever want that, but when you're still trying to figure out your life, it's really difficult to navigate something as serious as Alzheimer's. Are you aware of, or did you seek out, are there any? I'm going to have to ask my staff partners, the Alzheimer's Association. They need to have support groups for like super young people. Because
They
I know
do.
they do. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Phew, I
I was
haven't
the youngest
actually.
one by about 10 years, though. I was the youngest one by
40.
10 years. So, I mean, everyone was in their 30s. So, and then I showed up as a 21-year-old, but it was a wonderful group, and they
They were
really were
probably like the
fantastic.
AA meetings over there. I'm not casting aspersions, but I'm sure that they figured you were way in the wrong room. And
Yeah.
I can relate slightly to being the youngest one in the room because I always kind of joked that I won the double gold star because my mom was the youngest person needing care in the support group that I was in, and I was also the youngest caregiver. And I was 50. Yeah,
Hmm.
51 when I started. So that's significantly different than 21.
Yeah. And at 21, you have no idea what's going on. At least I didn't. I can only speak from my experience, but you're
No, I
figuring yourself out. And then
mhm.
you add this very hard thing, and then you're trying to impress like a boy that you kind of really like. And then you have to go and be like, hey, and my mom has Alzheimer's, and you have to bring him into the equation. And luckily, I picked a really good boy to introduce her to, because he's fantastic and I love him very much. He's my husband. But that's also a navigation thing that he had to go through. Is in his early 20s, what is it like to have a mother-in-law who has Alzheimer's? We had to, when we got married at 25, 26, that was the last time that she was really cognizant. And we had to have like a whole plan about what was it like if mom got overwhelmed? How can we
Mhm.
do her hair? How can we get her out of the ceremony if we need to be? How can we make sure that she doesn't wander off? How can, we had all these considerations on top of trying to get married of what do we do with mom? Because we didn't know how mom was going to react. Mom ended up reacting perfectly, of course. We had no, not of course, we had no idea, but she ended up acting perfectly. She was happy that she knew her daughter was getting married, and she was happy about that. And she said, and I quote, you're in a pretty dress and I'm in a pretty dress, and this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it's supposed to be. But we had to go through a whole rigmarole around what's it like to get married in your, mid 20s with a person whose mom has Alzheimer's, and you have to try to put that part of the equation of wedding planning, which is already a hard and stressful thing. And then you add that to it, and it was even more stressful and hard. So I think it was something that we all had to go through as a family.
Oh, I'm sure. I should add so I'm a retired wedding photographer. I should add like consulting services for that exact scenario, not necessarily young people with all, like your mom being young with Alzheimer's, but my daughter started planning her wedding. She was going to get married in 2020, like half the world. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the biggest questions we had, because at this point my mom was advanced Alzheimer's, um, she got overwhelmed easily. And we knew that if my mom was at the wedding, she would have to have somebody that was in charge of her to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that
Yep.
she was comfortable. so that I could enjoy the day. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, but I would still be worried about my mom. And it was just like, I like don't want to deal with this. And at the time, my paternal grandmother was still living, and she was blind from glaucoma, mostly blind from glaucoma. And so we wanted her there, but because she couldn't see, she shied away from a lot of those things. Like she did not go to my daughter's college graduation because, quote, I'm not going to be able to see it anyway. And I'm thinking that's kind of not the point, but whatever. Like you don't argue with somebody at that age. Maybe I should add that to my resume and see if I can make a few bucks. But yeah, I can only imagine. God, I think I'm glad I'm retired from wedding photography because you have to deal with all the family personalities and then to throw that in the mix. No, thank you. I don't want to deal with that. So your husband at this time, I mean, you must have known he was the right guy because he didn't go running away when he found out your mom had Alzheimer's, which, to be fair, would not. I wouldn't. What's the right word? I wouldn't judge him too harshly. It'd be like, okay, well, better people out there for you because that's a really hard thing to deal with, especially so young. So kudos to him. That he's definitely the right guy.
Oh yeah, no, he is. I wouldn't have been with him for 9 years if, he wasn't. He's an amazing person. I'm so grateful that I get to be his wife. He's so wonderful. But it was something I didn't tell him for about a month. I dated him for about a month, I remember, and I felt like it was a big secret that I was keeping. And I finally told him, I remember, and I felt like I was like, this is the moment where you can walk. You seem wonderful, but I understand, and so it felt kind of, if I remember correctly, which I do, it really felt that it was like I was carrying this thing, right, that I knew about, but that is very scary and it's degenerative. And so it was a difficult situation for him to come into. It would have been a difficult situation for anyone. And I felt like I was carrying the secret, and I wanted so badly for him to stay. I wanted him so badly for him to be with me. But I also, to your point, completely understood if he's like, I can't handle it because also I'm going to have to deal with this as long as I'm dating you. I'm going to be this is going to be a part of your life and it's going to be a part of our life and it's going to get worse. And what is that's going to add stress in a way that most relationships don't have that stress, you know? And I'm going to have to support you emotionally in a way that not a lot of other partners are going to have to support emotionally their significant others or their people that they're dating at this age in such a similar way. And it's such a hard thing, Alzheimer's, to be able to, watch someone, slip like sand through one's fingers. And so I remember being terrified of telling him. And I had to tell him anyway, and he didn't walk. And it's been 9 years and he's wonderful.
I also think being so young, it's like, this is going to sound terrible because I'm old enough to be your mom, so I can say this with some confidence. You don't have the life experiences that kind of help you navigate something this difficult. Not that it really got easier like at 50. And like I said, my grandmother had dementia, so it should have been easier, but it wasn't. That should tell everybody something. It's like you're still trying to figure out who you are and how you fit into the world. You haven't had, like, I'm assuming when your mom was diagnosed, were your grandparents still alive?
All of them had passed except for one. Her dad had
Okay.
passed to Alzheimer's. So
Ah,
all of my grandparents had passed except for my mom's mom. So my maternal grandmother is still alive, but she had to go, and we, had to watch that process happen as a family together.
that's so you had a little bit more experience than the average person who might be dealing with this later in life, like myself. So that your comment about somebody, I forget which one, passed from Alzheimer's. Have you done the genetic test? It sounds like your family history is slightly worse than mine.
But my family history is very bad. I've made the conscious and cognizant decision to not do the test because I don't want to know. And I think it's one of these things where I made the decision of I could easily have the protein, and I don't know exactly how the genetic testing works. frankly, but I know that I could test to see if I think have it. And I think I would rather in a way not know, because I'm grateful enough as it is to live every day as its fullest, because that's what I learned how to do with mom, because every day was the best day I was going to have with her. And so I learned how to swallow people whole, and I learned how to be present with them, highly present. And I don't think I want to know even more that I need to be even more present than I am, because I have this thing looming over my head in about 20, 30 years. I think I would rather go and pretend that I don't, and then have a plan, of course, but to live life relatively with some freedom of the idea that maybe it's not going to happen, rather than having this thing, coming down the pike. I would rather not know the train is coming to hit me than to watch it come and hit me. I think, but I definitely have it's definitely something that is incredibly genetic in my family. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And it's early onset Alzheimer's, the genetic thing. It's unfortunately not even regular Alzheimer's that comes later. It's early onset. That's genetic in our family. And so I've just made the decision to not know if there's going to be the train, because I think my life is happier without knowing.
Yeah, I debate back and forth. So my maternal great grandmother had what they called back in the day senile dementia. She died before I was born. I was born in 1966, the end. So I'm an old Gen X. And I don't think we knew, like, as I recall it, what flavor of dementia she had. My maternal grandmother had a brain aneurysm that leaked for 3 months. And so she survived the surgery to fix that when they finally realized it wasn't just a headache. And they never discussed what would happen with her if she did survive the surgery, because they didn't expect her to. And then my mom she wasn't diagnosed until she was 60, was she 70? No, she was 68. She was almost 69. So she was past the cutoff for early or younger onset Alzheimer's. But by that point, she was already mid stage. So with my armchair medical degree, basically claim that she had younger onset Alzheimer's, because she started showing signs at 53, very minor signs, not ones you would be like, this is kind of weird. It's when you look backwards that you can see them. But two things. I'm assuming that you do the lifestyle choices that will help reduce your risk, because that is a thing.
I use my brain a lot. I try to use my brain as much as humanly possible. And I found ways and hobbies to be like, I play board games all the time. I play them 3 times a week, which are, games. There's some scientific study that said that playing games may be able to help prevent cognitive decline. And then I also play Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm a dungeon master, and I have to be able to think a lot, and I like to think, and I read books. And so I try to really keep my brain active as much as possible, where I like to have lively discussions and think about philosophy and do critical thinking skills. But I also like to do all these other things that basically keep my brain as in like complete exercise mode. With the hope, I think I do it because I like it. I think that's the thing. I have to do it because I like it first, I think. And as a byproduct, I know that I'm helping my brain, maybe able to help prevent cognitive decline. But I think I'm happier knowing that I'm doing things that are keeping my brain active because I enjoy doing them, rather than doing them for the prevention of it, because that's reminding me that the train might be coming. I think, not to say that I'm like a chicken, not the chicken with your head cut off, the other one, the ostrich in the sand a little bit. But, I think that there's a little bit of that. I think, quite honestly, if I'm being completely honest, there's a little bit of the ostrich in the sand, because I think that if you think about it too much, I think it becomes existential dread a little bit. And I just choose, or there's a lot of powerlessness, and I choose to feel like I have agency, even though it might be, it might be a falsity that I have agency, but I think I make me happier if I think that I do have some agency in it. But I do a healthy lifestyle, but I do it because I just naturally like it.
That makes sense. What was it, 2006, went on a weight loss journey. My dad's side of the family, huge family history of diabetes, which surprisingly, despite the obesity gene that we inherited from that side of the family, the only people on my dad's side of the family with diabetes are men. And trust me, myself and a couple of my cousins, all female, um, seriously and inherited the fat gene. And I was just determined I was not going to get diabetes, and I was going to figure out what it was going to take to lose the weight, keep it off forever, and be happy. That took a long time, but it
Mhm.
worked. And so now it was funny this morning. I have like twice a month, I have a 9 a.m. meeting. 9 a.m. is about halfway through my workout. Sometimes it's the beginning of the workout if I'm kind of slacking off in the morning. And so, to be able to be dressed and camera ready to be on Zoom for these meetings, which I don't really have to be, but I also knew we were recording after lunch. So it's not like I could wait till later in the day to get all nice, as good looking as I could possibly do. I got very intrigued with his article on a potential vaccine. It's a nasal spray vaccine for Alzheimer's. So that was the second point that I was going to bring up with you. You being younger have a much better chance of those things being effective and in place
Mhm.
than somebody like me. So I was slacking this morning a little bit. That article was longer than I expected, and it was like, I'm just going to do a 15-minute Peloton ride because that's better than nothing. And I'm kind of feeling a certain kind of way. And I did the workout. It was surprisingly quite difficult for 15 minutes. And it's like, wow, that just changed the way my whole day was starting. Um, and so it's like back in 2004, 2005, there's like no way in hell I would have been like, 15 minutes is nothing. It's not going to do me any good. I might as well just sit here and read some more. So yeah, it's doing the life, you have to have the healthy lifestyle because it makes you feel good or you want to do it. You can't just, I don't think doing it because you have to is very effective. So we've talked a lot about history. We haven't talked too much about your poetry. So did you how did poetry become part of your grief toolkit? Is it something you did before you wrote poetry before, or how did that all come about?
Oh, no, it was the only thing that made sense and made me feel better. I think grandma has a master, she has more than a master's in English. So she has a 6 years degree. And my mom had a English degree from the University of North Georgia. So I come from a line of English majors or English, English people that are predominantly having a degree in English. And so, but I never wrote creatively. Grandma shaped and molded me into a damn good research paper writer. I can write a mean research paper, but I never wrote creatively. And then I went and I started to write, and it was the only thing that made me feel a little bit better. And I think that when you're going through grief, it's something that I never knew is until I was in it, even though I went through anticipatory grief for a very long time. I think that it's very different from going from anticipatory grief to the grief that actually happens after the person passed. At least that was it for me. And so I try to do all these things that would make me feel better. The main one I used is my defensive intellect. So I tried to intellectualize my grief, and I tried to go and get all the journals because I was like, that's going to work because I've listened to all the lectures and I went through anthropologically, like how does grief work and physiologically what's going on with my body. So I need more rest because my body is going through something. And I did all these things and I was like, nothing works. Nothing makes me feel better. I feel like complete and total, pardon my French. Do you mind if I curse really quick for the sole
Go
sake of
ahead.
this? Dog shit. And then I was like, nothing makes me feel good. And then I started to write, and it's the only thing that made me feel better. So I wrote as a kind of a way to get the emotions and the feelings that were inside my body, outside my body. And then once they were outside my body, I could be able to look at them and then process them. So it became like a really healthy tool. And it was the only tool I had in my toolkit. I went to grief support groups and things like that, but really the only thing that made me feel good was creative expression. And the way that my creative expression kind of came was through poetry. I didn't choose poetry. It's the only way that it kind of, the feelings in my body came out. And then I never intended to share it with anyone. I used it solely for me. It did its purpose. And then apparently I was told that I was pretty good. And I released it with the hope that maybe it can do some good and maybe someone else cannot feel so alone. And I think that that's what a lot of the grief books do, or there's a lot of people that write about grief. And I think it's always the idea is that maybe someone cannot feel so alone and isolated in this thing that's an incredibly isolating experience, which is grief. And I think everyone's grief experience is very unique and very personal. However, I think that there are probably some commonalities in between everyone's grief experiences. One of those probably being that it's isolating, and what people hopefully try to do. And my belief is that when you release something about grief, I think it's my perspective, and I've talked to a few other authors, and so my data set's kind of small, but you do it because you hope it can help. And I think that's, kind of what I did because it helped me, and maybe my processing tool can help others, and maybe they can be inspired to try to find their own processing tool. Because it might not be poetry, it might not be writing, but it might be like embroidery or painting or crocheting or, doing something even more artistic than I can, but whatever that is, it helped me. And maybe, by talking about how doing creative expression helped me, maybe someone else can, figure out if it helps them.
That makes sense. And being creative fires up more regions of your brain than any other task, for lack of a better word. I think it's a previous recording. I'm not too sure which order these episodes are coming out. Thanks to getting sick, everything got scrambled up. Not that the listeners will notice because everything still comes out on Tuesdays when technology works properly. But I talked to this neurologist, and that's what we were talking about, was using creativity to help keep your cognitive well-being. So you're doing good on that part. Just by enjoying yourself, you're doing really good. I find it interesting that people process their grief through creativity because, as I mentioned, my mom died right at the start of the pandemic, and we had downsized. And one of the things I had done was cleaned out all of the crafty stuff out of my office that I hadn't used in 20 years, didn't think I was going to use. Like, if I did not have an immediate idea, it went in the garage sale. I made some teachers really happy, which is great. And then, of course, we have the pandemic and the shutdown. And so my theory of when I figure out what craft I want to do, I'll just go to the store and buy the stuff. That did not happen. I had to order everything online. And I started making handmade greeting cards, which I would show you one, but I'd have to run in the hallway and grab some. And one of the things that I did was, in my learning process, thankfully it's not a very big learning curve, was I made Halloween cards for the residents in the memory care that my mom lived in, and took handmade cards, a little treat box with some chocolate in it, and passed it out to all the people that were in the memory care, because that made me feel good. I kind of got to get back in touch with some of the caregivers that I'd known while my mom lived there. And my theory was the people with Alzheimer's aren't going to care if it looks like crap or not. They just care about the chocolate and that somebody was paying attention to them. And so that is my hobby. That is what I do to relax, to de-stress. And now I've learned that it's very good for my brain too. So maybe that's how I've been processing my grief with my mom. Because I lost my mom at the end of March. I lost the dog that loved me more than he loved himself in November. And then promptly found out that our trip to Yosemite, December of 2020, was canceled. And then I lost my paternal grandmother at the beginning of April of 21. So in 53 weeks, I can do math. I lost 3 people that were really close to, plus moving out of the house that I thought we'd live in forever. And oh my God, it was like chaos. It's like grief and all that upheaval is definitely not fun. So there was another question I was going to ask. Oh, how did you get in touch with the music producer? That doesn't seem like you just flip open Instagram and be like, oh, let me DM this guy.
No, it was through a mentorship program.
I think you did say that.
Yeah, it was through song. So I got inspired by songwriting. Initially, I got inspired. I don't know if I even got inspired. I read a lot of Sylvia Plath. I love Sylvia Plath. And then I started to listen to Joni Mitchell, and I love Joni. Dylan. I love Leonard Cohen. I started to listen to all of these people. And then I was like, well, I can write poetry and maybe I'll try my hand at trying what it would be like to write, song lyrics or something like that. I was just trying to see if I could do it, quite honestly. I had no idea. It was just like because at this point, I had no intention of ever releasing anything. And then I went to a songwriting mentorship session, and it was with a record producer from Nashville. And he was like, "You're amazing." And I'm like, "What? That doesn't make any sense. What is that? No, I don't, this isn't in my bingo card. That doesn't make, I was just trying to figure out how to be better because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I was like, how can I do this better? And, I'm kind of doing it as a hobby on the side, and it kind of makes me feel good. And then, no, and he said it was great and he would produce me. And I was like, I didn't, it boggled the mind. But I did it, I was like, well, maybe this can help someone, and maybe I'll have a record and I can go, and that would be a cool thing to be able to say, what's your fun fact? And now I don't have to say, like my favorite color is green. I could be like, I have a record, but it ended up being really amazing. And so that's how I kind of got in touch with him, is I just literally went to a songwriting mentorship session and it just came naturally, but there was no agenda for me ever to do something like this. I just literally went, and I was told that I was really good and that someone would produce me. And I was just flabbergasted. I was like, it still boggles the mind, quite honestly. But yeah.
And that would have been one of those, it would have been a good answer for the two truths and a lie. Because I'm assuming most people would not have expected that to be one of the truths. So how unfortunate that you can't use it that way.
I know. Well, yeah, but the cool thing is that my other truth, I'm so excited about this. I can now become a Grammy member because I know people who you have to get not. I had no clue. I was like, I watched the Grammys and be like, what? And then, that's pretty neat. How neat is that? And then I now know people who are Grammy members and they can nominate me, and they're going to nominate me and I'm going to become a Grammy member. And then that's going to be my really cool fun fact. So I have two fun facts at that point. So I have an album and I'll be a Grammy member next year. And then
Awesome.
my lie will be like, my favorite color is red, which is my husband's favorite color.
That is amazing. But it's like,
Yeah.
I love talking to caregivers turned creators. And this is probably one of the, I don't want to say most extreme, but it's pretty fascinating. A lot of the caregivers turned creators write books or create apps. Some people create products, courses, coaching, the standard, I don't want to say standard things because all of these things are amazing. I have only talked to one other music artist, and he used his music. He was like a rapper or hip hop, not my genre of music, unfortunately. And he used writing this. He wrote an album that basically, it sounds like it might have been similar to what you've done. Is it helped him process what he was going through with his dad, and then after the death of his dad. And I think there's one song on the album. It's the title song, The Long Goodbye. And it talks about him crossing the Golden Gate Bridge to go visit his dad. And since I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area originally, I will always be from the San Francisco Bay Area. It was kind of a nice tie-in, but I have a feeling your music might be a little bit more along the lines of what I like. So I'm definitely going to have to give that a listen, which prompts me to ask. You said the album is out now, correct?
Yeah,
right?
and
Okay.
it's a poetry album. So I don't sing. You're very lucky for that because I can't sing worth a flip.
Me neither.
And I can't. But what we did is the poetry is I recite it, and then I have it backed by like different session jazz musicians. So, and it was all done very impromptu, and so they listened. I said what it was about. They listened to what I was saying. They responded to it in time. We did everything about 1 or 2 takes, and that was it.
Oh,
so
nice.
And it's
Definitely
a quick listen. It lasts about 20 minutes, I think, altogether. But
Awesome. Well, as listeners know, I always link everything in the show notes. So Cleo's website is linked in the show notes. Is that the best place where they can find all of this stuff? Gonna try
Yeah,
to keep
I
it
put them up.
simple.
I know. I try to keep it simple. I'm a process girly, so I try to streamline all of my things because I can barely keep up with, my own life. So I try to streamline processes as much as possible. So it's on the website. There's two buttons. One goes to Spotify, one goes to YouTube. And then it has if you're a person that likes to read along, it has all the poems there as well. And if you like pictures and things like that, my mom is on the website too, so you can see pictures of what she looked like. And yeah.
Which brings me to my last question. When we had our little planning call, you told
Mm-hmm.
me that you have like each month's book list planned out. So do you know? So this is the beginning of September. Your episode's either
Yeah.
coming out, it's coming out around Thanksgiving at this point. I checked my little list. So do you have your December list thought out yet? It's a little early.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I do.
Do you want to share a little bit
I
about it?
Yeah, so I read cozy murder mysteries. It's my favorite thing in the whole world. Mom loved Agatha Christie. Mom got me into Agatha. So I have cozy murder mysteries. I got one called Murder at North Pond. I got another one where you get to be it's a bear, it's, like the Build-A-Bears kind of, like
Mm-hmm.
it's a bear factory and it's set in the holidays. And so there's like a murder at a bear factory, which I'm not really sure how that works, but that's fine. Then there's one called um, then there's another one, and it's all about a magical bookshop that uses poetry to be able to help to solve murders, which I think is delightful. So I think that the one in the holidays is using Edgar Allan Poe to be able to help to solve a murder. And then I got another one that uses anthropomorphic animals to be able to that like it's an entire town of little animals, and there's a fox reporter, and there's a bear that's the sheriff, and then someone is like died, and then they have to go and there's a little like crow who is named Lenore. It's adorable. So they've made a series. One of the books is in the wintertime. So I got like six of them because I read my books at the seasons. So I got my ones coming up for Halloween, and then I got my ones that are Christmas time or like the holiday season. And so I'm just, I'm chopping up the bit for them, but I'm keeping, I'm not, I am sometimes good with patience. And so I'm patiently waiting to be able to dive in to my cozy murder mysteries that are, holiday themed.
I should have looked. I've read a lot of those myself, and there's a series that has to do with bakeries. Just going to make me
Yes,
want
there
to.
is. Yes.
Yes, I'm sure you've read
Yes.
those, but it's like, yeah, they're really fun, and they're like super fast reads.
Oh my gosh.
They're
And the
not super
puns.
intellectual at all.
The puns though. The puns are insane. It's like there's something like, oh, what is it? Oh, I'm thinking about, like the murder or the cake is the only thing that's rising. The tension is too. And you're like, yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I needed in a book, or there's like, you can barely believe this murder. And it's about like the bears, right? And you're like, oh, that was a good pun. You can barely believe it. Thank you, book. And it's just delightful. How could you not love a book like that?
Now, have you read all these before?
Absolutely not. I went
Oh,
on a
okay.
spending spree. My
Oh
husband's
dear.
like, what are all these boxes? And I'm like, these are questions you don't want to know the answers to. Don't ask me questions like this. And so I have them all lined up, and my husband's like, you're not reading them. And I'm like, no, they're for the seasons. And he's just kind of, I think he's befuddled a little bit, and he's kind of given up trying to figure me out. And he just kind of lets me go off and do my little thing, which really is why we've been together for 9 years. It kind of works out for us.
Yeah, 'cause I don't reread books, so you
I don't
probably
either.
hate me. I prefer to read them on my phone because one, I always have
Mm.
it with me, and two, I get so many books from guests, and then I have to figure out how to share them. I keep the ones that have like excellent dementia advice. So they're like a reference book. I'm not going to get rid of those. But once I've read the story, they have to get passed to somebody else to read it and get the good information out of it. And I just can't do that with everything that I read because I read a lot. So, and right now I got books all over my house. I'm going to have to get to, you get to a certain age where it gets a little hard to read at night because the light's not very good and your eyes aren't very good. So that it does help to read on my phone because I can adjust the contrast and the brightness.
Yeah, I'm an old paper book girly. I love my pages. I love my turning of the pages. But there are some where I go, this type, I have 20/20 vision. I'm like, this type is too small. What is this? It needs to be at least 3 times bigger than this. I'm like, and then one time it was magnificent. I read a book and it was said big font. Okay. It was like maybe 20 lines a page. And it was 400 pages. Typically it's supposed to be 200. It doubled it by 4 and made it 400 pages. It was the easiest book to read because all the words were like 3 inches tall or something. And I was like, this is amazing. I can't, then I had to go back to all my small font. And I was like, this isn't nearly as easy and fun to read as my large font, murder mystery book. That was about, that one used the works of Emily Dickinson to help solve murders. And it was just absolutely delightful to read a large font book. So I'm on the lookout for large font mystery books. It's a very niche market, but yes.
Well, I bet you with our aging population, you'll find more of those. I don't even have 20/20 vision with my glasses on. The eye doctor that I started seeing, I don't know how many years ago, she's the first one that ever admitted could not correct my vision to 20/20. And I'm like, is that why I have to use the GPS? Because by the time I can read the street sign, it's a little too late to turn. Or you're like driving on the freeway and you're like, oh, that's the exit that I should have gotten off of. Dang it. So I was a super early adopter of GPS just because I don't have depth perception and I can't see for beans. So the older I get, the less I drive. And like I said, I'm almost 58. So I have a feeling I've had 4 cars in my whole life. The one I have now might be the last, which is kind of depressing, but I don't have problems driving in the daylight, but in the dark, it's like, no, thank you. I'm one of those old ladies. But this has been delightful. Now I feel like if you want to send me a list of all those cozy murder mysteries, because the ones you were talking about in our previous call, I remember now that you're reminding me, I'm like, I need to check those out. So if you want to send me a list, I'll put some of those in the show notes because I have a feeling the listeners might also enjoy some light-hearted, delightful murder mysteries to kind of, take your mind off of the ugliness that's going on in our lives.
Yes, and I have very good taste. Not in everything, but in some things. One of them is murder mysteries. So I if I recommend it, it's because it's darn good. And so I don't recommend bad books. And I'm pretty shrewd. I can tell. Apparently, like an editor said that they can tell within 1 page if it's going to be a good book or not. Some like really big editors or 1 chapter or something, I can pretty much do the same thing. So if it's in the show notes, it's recommended, and I have my Reese or Cleo. Cleo's my pen name, so I use my real name, which is Reese. But Cleo/Reese's stamp of approval that this is a good murder mystery with a good, clever ending, with good characters, and I put my name behind it. Both of them, my pen name and my legal name.
Awesome. Well, if we haven't given you guys some advice on how to process grief, how to use creativity to do it, how to use creativity for self-care, some good listening, some good reading, well, I don't know what we've been doing today. So I want to thank Cleo/Reese. Now I understand why the emails have had both names on them. Confuses the heck out of me. I want to thank you for joining us and telling us your story because it was absolutely fascinating. And I don't want to say it was a little heartbreaking, but it was also heartwarming at the same time.
We contain multitudes. And I think that maybe my experience contains multitudes. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Sign up and you will not regret hearing from me every Wednesday morning. And now, here's a taste of what you can expect next Tuesday.
I'd like to recommend that people do neurobics. Have you've heard of these neurobics, this kind of new? This is something that if you're caregiving, you can do during your caregiving day without anybody hardly noticing it. So the concept is to do 2 different brain processes at once, or do a brain process you do in a different way. So simple ones would be, brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, because you really have to think about it and you have to actually go through all the motor movement, because you're not on automatic with your dominant hand. You're like, whoa, this is actually a lot of coordination. You're making things purposely hard, but they're brief things so you can fit them in your day. An idea of combining 2 things would be like walking up the stairs, counting backwards by 5s. So you're giving yourself not a super complex task, but it definitely requires some attention while you're doing something physical.
This Black Friday, be smart. Grab Roborock's big deals on intelligent vacuums. Till December 2nd, get 67% off Roborock's Q5 Pro, featuring high-quality cleaning performance, 50% off Q5 Max Plus for entry-level users, and 43% off Q Revo S for ultimate convenience. Plus $700 off Roborock's S8 Max V Ultra with revolutionary corner-to-edge cleaning. Order now at Roborock.com or Amazon.com.